was not supposed to be here. He was supposed to be on vacation. He had saved money for 3 years to visit the famous floating gardens of Station Verity, where flowers from 100 worlds bloomed in zero gravity. Instead, he stood alone in a room made of crystal, surrounded by creatures he had only seen in documentaries. The room was enormous. The ceiling rose so high that clouds actually formed near the top. 12 platforms floated in a circle, each holding representatives from the galaxy's most powerful species. They clicked their mandibles nervously on one platform. They looked like giant praying mantises wearing robes of silver thread. They floated in water spheres on another, their jellyfish-like bodies pulsing with soft blue light. There were others too, beings made of stone, beings made of light. Beings that could not even describe because his human brain could not fully process what his eyes were seeing. And in the center of it all stood one confused Korean professor who had simply been in the wrong place at the wrong time. Earth's ambassador to the Galactic Council had found him eating noodles at a food stall on the station. She was a tall woman with sharp eyes and a permanent expression of stress. When she saw him, she had actually grabbed his arm and started running. "You speak languages, yes?" she had asked while dragging him through corridors. "I teach linguistics at Seoul National University," had replied, still holding his chopsticks. "Why are we running?" Our candidate missed the transport. The backup candidate also missed the transport. The trial starts in 1 hour, and if humanity does not present someone, we lose our chance for the next 500 years. Trial? What trial? That was how learned about the trial of ascension. Every species that wanted a permanent seat on the Galactic Council had to prove their worth. They had to show that their kind had something valuable to offer. For some species, this meant displaying military power. For others, it meant showing artistic achievement or scientific discovery. But once every 1,000 years, the Council held a special trial, the trial of knowledge. This trial was simple in concept but impossible in practice. The candidate had to decipher an ancient script that no one had ever read. The script was written by the precursors, mysterious beings who had lived billions of years ago. They had created life on countless worlds. They had built structures that still floated between galaxies, and they had left behind writings that no species had ever understood. The High Arbiter floated forward now. Its name was, and it looked like a human-shaped flame made of golden light. When it spoke, the words appeared directly in its mind. "The trial of ascension begins," announced. "The candidate from Earth will step forward." Looked around, hoping somehow that the real candidate had arrived, but was gesturing frantically from the observation gallery above. Her message was clear: "Move, now." He stepped forward. His shoes made soft sounds on the crystal floor. Every eye and sensor and mystical perception organ in the room focused on him. "State your name and your qualification," commanded. "I am," he said, his voice smaller than he wanted it to be. "I am a professor of historical linguistics. I study how languages change over time and how writing systems develop." A sound came from the platform. It took a moment to realize it was laughter. Their candidate, a creature named, had spent 40 years preparing for this moment. It had 17 quantum computers implanted in its brain. It had memorized every known language in the galaxy. Had memorized where the good coffee shops were near his university. The keeper moved forward next. This being was ancient beyond measure. Its body looked like a living library, with pages and scrolls growing from its skin like leaves from a tree. In its many hands, it held a stone tablet about the size of a laptop screen. "This is the eternal script," the keeper said. Its voice sounded like rustling paper. "The words of the precursors, the oldest writing in existence. You have 1 solar cycle to provide a translation. If you succeed, humanity earns the right to join the council. If you fail, your species must wait another 500 years. The tablet floated toward. He caught it gently, surprised by how light it was. The stone was smooth and warm, almost alive, and on its surface, strange symbols had been carved with perfect precision. Studied the markings. There were curved lines and straight lines, dots and dashes, circles within circles. At first glance, it looked like random decoration, but had spent 20 years looking at writing systems from every culture on Earth. He had studied Egyptian hieroglyphics and Chinese characters. He had analyzed Sumerian cuneiform and Mayan glyphs. He had even written papers about how Korean Hangul was the most scientifically designed alphabet in human history. And as he looked at these ancient symbols, something strange happened. His brain began to see patterns. "This is not random," he whispered to himself in Korean. "This is structured, this follows rules." Around him, the other candidates were already beginning their work. They activated floating screens and started running complex algorithms. They closed their eyes and reached out with telepathic senses, trying to read meaning from the stone itself. A being of living crystal began to vibrate at different frequencies, attempting to unlock the script through resonance. Had none of these tools. He had only his eyes, his training, and a small notebook he always carried in his pocket. He sat down on the crystal floor, placed the tablet before him, and began to write. Above him, Ambassador covered her face with her hands. She had just sent a linguistics professor to compete against the greatest minds in the galaxy. Humanity's future depended on a man who, 3 hours ago, had been complaining about the price of space station noodles, but was not thinking about pressure or politics or the weight of his entire species watching him. He was thinking about something else entirely. These symbols looked familiar, not because he had seen them before, but because they followed principles he understood, principles that a Korean king had discovered 600 years ago. "Interesting," said quietly, and he began to work. 6 hours had passed. The great crystal chamber hummed with activity. Machines floated through the air. Lights blinked in patterns that did not understand. The greatest minds in the galaxy were attacking the eternal script with every tool their civilizations had created over millions of years. And sat on the floor with a pencil and notebook, drawing shapes like a child in art class. Ambassador watched from above with growing despair. She had sent 17 emergency messages to Earth explaining the situation. The responses had not been helpful. The Minister of First Contact had simply replied, "Fix this." The President had written, "We believe in you." Neither message explained how she was supposed to make a linguistics professor defeat quantum computers. But something strange was happening on the chamber floor. The candidate had been confident at the start. Its 17 quantum processors had analyzed the script from every mathematical angle. It had compared the symbols to known patterns from across the galaxy. It had run simulations that would have taken a human computer 10,000 years to complete. And it had found nothing. "The script is mathematically inconsistent," announced, its mandibles clicking with frustration. "The symbol patterns do not follow logical rules. This is not a language. This is random noise designed to look meaningful." The candidate surfaced from its trance, the jellyfish-like being pulsed with exhausted light. "There are no psychic impressions," it reported. "The precursors left no mental echo. The stone is empty of memory." One by one, the candidates began to fail. A being of living crystal cracked down its center from the strain of its attempts. A creature made of mathematical equations simply disappeared, unable to reconcile the script with its understanding of reality. By hour 8, 5 candidates had officially withdrawn, but kept writing. He had filled 20 pages of his notebook. At first, he had simply every symbol, organizing them by shape, curved symbols in one group, angular symbols in another, symbols with dots, symbols without dots. It was basic work, the kind of thing a first-year student would do. Then he started to notice something. The curved symbols appeared most often at the end of clusters. The angular symbols appeared at the beginning. This was not random. This was structure. This was the difference between consonants and vowels. His heart beat faster. He looked more closely at the angular symbols. Some had one line, some had two, some had three, and the number of lines seemed to connect to something physical. A single line for sounds made with the lips, 2 lines for sounds made with the tongue, 3 lines for sounds made deep in the throat. "No," whispered, "that cannot be right." But the pattern held. Every symbol he tested followed the same rule. The shape of the symbol described how to make the sound. It was not an arbitrary code. It was a diagram, a teaching tool. This was exactly how Hangul worked. In 1443, King of Korea had created the Korean alphabet. Unlike other writing systems that had evolved randomly over centuries, Hangul was designed scientifically. Each consonant shape showed the position of the tongue, lips, or throat when making that sound. Each vowel was built from simple lines that represented heaven, earth, and humanity. A Korean child could learn to read in a single day because the system explained itself. The precursors had done the same thing. Laughed out loud. The sound echoed through the crystal chamber, making several aliens turn toward him with confusion. Professor's voice came through the small device in his ear. "What is happening? Are you losing your mind?" Replied, using the polite Korean address, "I am not losing anything. I am finding everything. This script is not a mystery. It is a lesson. The precursors were not hiding information. They were teaching." Teaching what? Teaching how to speak, teaching how to write, teaching anyone who found this tablet exactly how their language worked. He stood up, stretching his legs. Think about it. The precursors seeded life across the galaxy. They wanted their children to communicate, so they created a writing system that any intelligent species could learn, regardless of what sounds they could make. On her platform above, leaned forward. "Are you saying you can read it?" "Not yet, but I understand how it works. The symbols are not arbitrary. Each shape has meaning. Each curve and line teaches something." He held up his notebook. "I have identified 47 base characters. I know which ones are consonants and which are vowels. I know how they combine into syllables. Now I just need to figure out what the syllables mean." Had been listening. This compound eyes focused on the small human with new attention. "Impossible," it said. "My processors analyzed every possible pattern. There is no consistent mathematical structure." Shook his head. "You were looking for math. This is not math. This is linguistics. This is how beings actually speak and think. Language is not perfectly logical. It is organic. It grows. It has exceptions and irregularities. Your computers cannot find the pattern because they are looking for perfection in something that is beautifully imperfect." He sat back down on the floor and opened his notebook to a fresh page. "But I can find it," he said quietly, "because I have spent my whole life studying imperfect things." Above him, the keeper watched with ancient eyes. Pages rustled across its body like leaves in wind. For the first time in 600 years, it spoke. "The human sees what others cannot," it said, its voice echoing through the chamber. "Continue, little scholar, we are watching." Did not look up. He was already working on the next problem. If the symbols showed how to make sounds, then the combinations would show words. And if he could find words, he could find meaning. He had 18 hours left. He started writing faster. Hour 18 arrived like a quiet storm. The crystal chamber had grown still. Most candidates had abandoned their attempts. Their platforms stood empty, their machines silent. Only 2 remained in the trial. The candidate who refused to accept defeat, and one small human professor who had not slept in nearly a full day. His eyes burned. His hand ached from writing. He had filled his entire notebook and had started using paper that Ambassador had desperately sent down from the observation gallery. But when he finally stood up, there was something new in his expression. Not exhaustion, not despair. Certainty. "I request to present my findings," he announced. The High Arbiter flickered with surprise. Golden light rippled across its form. No candidate had ever made such a request before the full time had ended. Most spent every possible minute working, desperately trying to find answers. This human was volunteering to finish early. "You may speak," said. Walked to the center of the chamber, carrying the stone tablet in one hand and his papers in the other. Every remaining being in the room watched him. In the observation gallery, gripped the railing so hard her knuckles turned white. On Earth, 3 billion people watched through broadcast links, though most did not understand what they were seeing. "The eternal script," began, his voice steady, "is not a code, it is not a puzzle, it is not a test of intelligence. It is a gift." He held up the tablet so everyone could see. The precursors created life on countless worlds. They knew that their children would grow and develop and eventually look to the stars. They knew that these children would be different from each other. Different bodies, different senses, different ways of thinking. So they created a writing system that could adapt to any species. He pointed to a cluster of symbols on the tablet. These marks describe sounds, not specific sounds but types of sounds. This symbol means a sound made by stopping airflow. This one means a sound made by letting air flow freely. This modifier shows whether the sound is high or low in pitch. Any species that can make noise can use this system. It teaches itself. The keeper leaned forward, pages rustling with excitement. "Show us," it whispered. Nodded. He picked up a stylus and began to draw in the air. Light trailed behind his movements, leaving glowing symbols hanging in space. "This is the first word of the inscription," he said. It combines a stopped airflow sound made at the front of the mouth with a free-flowing sound made with an open throat. When spoken, it sounds approximately like this. He made a sound. It was strange, not quite like any language on Earth, but clearly deliberate, clearly meaningful. "The word means child or offspring," continued. "The entire first line reads, 'To our children who find these words.'" Silence fell over the chamber, complete, absolute silence. Then the keeper began to shake. Its entire body trembled. Papers flew from its form like leaves in a hurricane. At first, thought something was wrong. Then he realized what was happening. The keeper was crying. 10 billion years, the keeper said, its voice breaking. 10 billion years we have kept these tablets. 10 billion years we have waited for someone to read the words of the precursors. And now, finally, we hear their voice. Even had stopped its protests. The stared at with something that might have been respect. But was not finished. "I must tell you something else," he said. "Something that may be difficult to hear." Flickered dangerously. "Speak." "The precursors were brilliant. Their system is elegant and functional, but it is not perfect." He paused, choosing his next words carefully. "There are inefficiencies, redundancies, places where the system could be improved." The chamber erupted. Mandibles clicked with outrage. Several other species began speaking at once. The idea that anyone could criticize the precursors was unthinkable. They were considered gods. Their works were considered sacred. But raised his hand, asking for silence. "I mean no disrespect," he said, "but I am a scholar of writing systems. I have studied hundreds of alphabets from my own world, and I can see that this script has the same problems that early human writing systems had." He drew new symbols in the air. "Here in the vowel system, they use 3 different markers for sounds that are very similar. 2 would be enough. Here, in the consonant clusters, they use a doubling method that requires extra strokes. A simpler approach would save time and reduce confusion." "You dare," said, its light now red with anger, "to suggest that the precursors made mistakes." "I suggest that they were teachers," replied calmly. "Good teachers, great teachers, but teachers are not gods. Teachers create first drafts. Teachers expect their students to learn and grow and eventually do better." He reached into his pocket and pulled out an old, worn book. It was a copy of the the document King had written to explain the creation of Hangul. On my world, a king named created an alphabet in 1443. He faced the same problems the precursors faced. He needed a writing system that could be learned by anyone, not just scholars. He needed something that explained itself. And in some ways, held up the book, he solved the problems more elegantly than the precursors did. You claim, the keeper said slowly, that a human king improved upon the work of the beings who created all life. Smiled for the first time since the trial began. I claim that he tried to solve the same problem they solved, and I believe, with respect, that I can show you where both could be better. He looked up at, whose light had shifted from red to something uncertain. Would you like to see? The Galactic Council went into emergency session. For 12 hours, the representatives argued behind closed doors. Some demanded that the human be removed from the trial for insulting the precursors. Others insisted that his translation proved humanity worthy of a council seat. The filed 17 formal complaints, claiming that had cheated somehow, though they could not explain how. Ambassador did not sleep during those 12 hours. She paced in her quarters, drinking coffee and waiting for news. When the door finally opened, she expected to see security forces coming to escort back to Earth in disgrace. Instead, she saw the High Arbiter floated into her room, its golden light filling every corner. Had never been this close to one of the before. She could feel warmth radiating from its form, like standing near a gentle sun. The council has decided, said, the trial is not over. His heart sank. He failed. He did not fail. He did something no candidate has ever done. He challenged us. The light shifted, becoming softer. He claims he can improve upon the precursors. The council has decided to let him try. What does that mean? It means we are giving him one more day. If he can create a better version of the eternal script, one that keeps the original meaning but removes the inefficiencies he described, then humanity will not only earn a seat on the council. Humanity will be recognized as the first species to build upon the work of the precursors. Sat down heavily on her bed, and if he cannot, then he will have insulted the founders of all life in the galaxy, and humanity will never be welcome among the stars again. Received the news calmly. He was sitting in a small room near the main chamber, eating a bowl of rice that had brought him. When she told him about the council's decision, he simply nodded and continued eating. You do not seem worried, observed. I have been thinking about this problem for 18 hours, replied. I know what needs to be done. I just need tools and time. What tools? A writing surface, something to write with, and if possible I would like help from someone on Earth. A colleague named, she is a computational linguist. She can help me test my ideas quickly. Made the arrangements. Was a young professor who had studied under years ago. She was brilliant with languages and even better with computers. When she received the emergency message, she thought it was a joke. When she realized it was real, she started working immediately. The next day, the crystal chamber filled again. But this time, the mood was different. Word had spread across the galaxy. A human was going to try to improve the work of the precursors. Some species watched with anger. Some watched with curiosity. Some watched because they believed they were about to see the greatest arrogance in galactic history punished. Stood in the center of the chamber with a large writing surface floating before him. On one side, he had projected the original eternal script. On the other side, he would create his improved version. I want to be clear about something, he said before beginning. I am not claiming to be smarter than the precursors. I am standing on their shoulders. They did the hard work. They created the foundation. I am simply applying what I have learned from my own world's history of writing. He picked up a stylus and began to draw. First, the vowel system. He created new symbols in the air. The precursors used 3 markers for high, medium, and low pitch, but medium pitch is simply the absence of high or low. We do not need a separate marker for it. 2 symbols are enough. He demonstrated by rewriting a section of the original text. The new version was shorter and cleaner. Second, the consonant clusters. More symbols appeared. The original system doubles certain marks to show intensity. This works, but it requires extra strokes. Instead, I propose using position. A mark placed higher means stronger. A mark placed lower means softer. Same information, fewer movements. Hour after hour he worked, sent corrections and suggestions from Earth. The 2 of them communicated constantly, testing each change against the original meaning. Nothing could be lost. Every nuance had to survive. The keeper watched with particular intensity. Every few hours, it would ask to read a passage in the new script. Each time, the meaning matched the original perfectly, but the new version was faster to write and easier to learn. As the final hour approached, made his last edition. The precursors could not have anticipated every species that would find their words, he said. Their system works for sounds that exist in nature, but some species communicate through chemicals, some through electrical signals, some through patterns of light. He drew new modifier symbols. I have added extensions, optional markers that can be attached to any character to indicate non-sound communication. A species that speaks through light can use these to show color and intensity. A species that uses chemicals can show concentration and type. The base system remains the same. It simply grows to include everyone. He set down his stylus. On the writing surface, 2 versions of the text floated side by side. The original eternal script on the left, the revisions on the right. The original font, said, gesturing to the left, is a masterpiece. It deserves eternal preservation. He gestured to the right. The improved font is my suggestion, a building on the foundation, a student's notes in the margins of a teacher's book. He looked up at the assembled council, at the trillion beings watching across the galaxy, at the ancient keeper who held the memory of the precursors themselves. Would you like the original font, he asked, or the improved version? The keeper spoke first. Both, it said, its voice trembling with something like joy. We want both. 1 year had passed since the trial. The galaxy had changed in ways that never expected. The Galactic Council adopted the revised script, calling it the standard after its 2 creators. Every diplomatic document now used it. Every trade agreement was written in it. Scientists from different species could finally share their research without the confusion of translation. Teachers across 100 worlds taught children how to read using the same elegant system. The original eternal script was preserved with honor. The keeper created special sanctuaries where the ancient tablets could be studied and admired. Pilgrims came from across the galaxy to see the words of the precursors, but next to each original inscription, they also found the improved version, a student's notes beside a teacher's lesson. Humanity received its seat on the Galactic Council, but more importantly, humanity received something else: respect. The other species no longer saw humans as primitive creatures from a small planet. They saw them as builders, as improvers, as beings who looked at sacred things and asked, how can this be better? Returned to Seoul, his university gave him a larger office and a smaller teaching load. They wanted him to focus on research. They wanted him to write papers about his discoveries, but was not interested in fame. He was interested in teaching. His new classes were unlike any before. Students from 9 different species attended his lectures. They were particularly talented at grammar. Their mathematical minds loved parsing sentences into logical structures. They struggled with written work because their tentacles were not designed for holding pencils. Invented a special system for them, using electronic pads that responded to pressure patterns in water. One afternoon, his graduate student Lee found him in his office, was grading papers while drinking tea. Outside his window, the campus was quiet. It was a normal day, a peaceful day. Professor said, "Can I ask you something?" Of course. How did you do it? She sat down across from him. The greatest minds in the galaxy could not read that script. They had quantum computers and telepathic powers and millions of years of knowledge. You had a notebook and a pencil. How did you succeed where they all failed? Thought about the question for a long moment. He set down his tea and looked at his student. They treated it like a puzzle, he said finally. A mystery to be solved, a code to be broken. They attacked it with force and technology and power. He pointed to a poster on his wall. It showed the Korean alphabet, Hangul, arranged in the traditional order. But writing is not a puzzle. Writing is a gift. It is how we share our thoughts with others. It is how we leave messages for children we will never meet. The precursors did not write the eternal script to confuse people. They wrote it to help people. When you understand that, the rest is just homework. Nodded slowly. But what about improving it? How did you have the courage to say that the precursors made mistakes? They did not make mistakes. They made first drafts, smiled. Every teacher knows that first drafts can be improved. Every good teacher hopes that their students will eventually do better than them. That is the entire point of teaching. You give knowledge to others so they can build on it. There was a knock at the door. Looked up to see an unexpected visitor. The High Arbiter floated in the doorway. Its golden light was softer now, gentler than it had been during the trial. High Arbiter said, standing up, I did not know you were coming to Earth. I came to see something, replied. May I enter? Of course. The being of light floated into the small office. It moved toward a glass case in the corner where kept his most treasured possession. Inside the case was an old book, the same one he had shown during the trial. This is the document, said, the one your king wrote. Yes, it explains how Hangul was created and why. It was written in 1443. Studied the book for a long time. Light flickered across its form in complex patterns. We have existed for 2 billion years, it said finally. We have seen empires rise and fall. We have watched species achieve greatness and then destroy themselves. In all that time, we never questioned the precursors. We assumed they were perfect. We assumed their works were complete. It turned to face. Your king was not a precursor. No, agreed. He was just a human who believed everyone deserved to read. Perhaps that is what the precursors believed as well, moved closer to the case. Perhaps that is why they could be improved upon. They were not gods seeking worship. They were teachers seeking students. And teachers, said quietly, hope to be surpassed. Flickered, and somehow knew this was the version of a smile. We chose correctly, said. When we gave humanity a seat on the council, some species objected. They said humans were too young, too primitive, too arrogant. But now I understand what you truly offer. What is that? You look upon the divine and say, good first draft, here are my notes. The light grew brighter. That is not arrogance. That is the greatest form of respect. It means you listened. It means you learned. It means you will carry our knowledge forward. Floated toward the door. Teach well, Professor. There are students waiting across the stars. After the arbiter left, sat back down at his desk, was staring at him with wide eyes. What happens now? She asked. Picked up his tea and took a sip. Outside, the sun was setting over Seoul. In the distance, he could see the mountains his ancestors had watched for thousands of years. Now, he said, we keep teaching, we keep learning, we keep improving. He smiled at his student. That is what humans do.